In what could lead to further escalation, United States of America launched multiple airstrikes against the Houthis, killing at least 53 people and injuring about 100, marking the largest military operation in West Asia since US President Donald Trump took office for a second time. The airstrikes come amid persistent attacks on commercial and military vessels of America and other allies of Israel in the Red Sea, which is a critical global shipping corridor. The airstrikes targeted multiple Houthi military facilities, including sites in the Yemeni capital of Sana'a, as well as their stronghold of Sada. The Houthis have retaliated twice since the attacks, with their leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi declaring, and I quote, "If they continue their aggression, we will continue the escalation," unquote. While Iran has consistently denied any link to the Houthis, the head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, General Hossein Salami, has warned that they will respond decisively and destructively if the enemies of Iran carry out their threats. Now, this confrontation could have implications on not just regional stability and the already strained US-Iran ties, but on crude oil and international shipping and therefore trade as well. The Houthis previously launched over 100 attacks on merchant vessels since November 2023, and they've already caused significant disruptions to global commerce. The Red Sea, remember, is one of the world's most vital shipping routes, with around 12% of global trade passing through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. India has so far maintained strategic balance between Iranian oil imports, as also dealing with its own companies being sanctioned by the United States of America. Now, these are legitimate concerns, but here's the question many are asking. What happened to Donald Trump's promise of not escalating and ending all wars? And what about the US-Iran ties, considering that the Supreme Leader Khamenei has rejected the nuclear talks offer that Donald Trump had extended to Iran? Let's try and decode this situation for you and what this means, not just for regional stability, for global peace as well. On Global Mirror, I'm joined by Dr. John Harrison, Homeland Security expert. I'm joined by Burzine Waghmar from Center of Iranian Studies, School of Oriental and African Studies. I'm also joined by Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, defense expert. Good evening and namaskar to all of you three gentlemen. Dr. John Harrison, let me begin with you. Your first thoughts on how Donald Trump has promised time and again that he's not going to be escalating conflicts, he's going to be ending the wars, but there you are, US launching multiple airstrikes against the Houthis.
Well, it certainly does seem to contradict his campaign promises, but we have to put this in context, as your lead-in piece so eloquently pointed out, that the Houthis injected themselves into the Gaza war, and they have been launching since November 2023, consistent attacks, despite their own promises that once there was a ceasefire in Gaza, they would stop attacking shipping. They haven't seemed to do that. So at a certain point, there does have to be a price paid for this. The real question here is that it's not clear what this campaign would do against versus what the United States has been doing. The Biden administration did certainly launch attacks against the Houthis, and it didn't really seem to have that much impact. So the real question here is this about the Houthis, or is this about sending a message to the Houthi supporters, Iran and others, that you need to start making better choices, because the global economy is at stake here, not just a designated terrorist group in Yemen.
Yeah. General Kulkarni, do you want to comment on this? What Dr. Harrison pinpointed, that is it going to be having any change of stance from the Houthis side? The fact that Donald Trump has been very direct in his attacks, not just against Houthis, but he's just put out a post against Iran saying that we will directly hold Iran responsible for whatever happens next. Do you think it's going to have an impact at all, or is it just some sort of posturing that Donald Trump wants to portray?
Shreya, thank you. I think it's a catch-22 situation, primarily because it's been on. The US has not been able to fly a single ship in the last 1 year which flies the US flag. None of the ships which intend to support or provide logistics to Israel have passed through the Red Sea. USA, UK, Israel, all of them have suffered. And 15% of the world trade has suffered. Obviously, we can well imagine 21,000 ships pass through that Red Sea every year. So that's a huge number. And now they have to go through the South African coast, resulting in additional insurance, additional costs, all of that the world has to bear. Much that what has happened, and Djibouti has a base which has got 8 countries, including USA, UK, China, Japan, Germany, France, Italy, all of them are there in Djibouti, which is not very far from Sana. If they had wanted to destroy Houthi, I don't think it would have taken any longer. But the fact that the Houthis have been able to actually obstruct for reasons their own to show support that the Israel, until and unless it stops, whatever they're doing in Gaza has to be stopped. And that is what it is all about. And presently they're saying that, well, let the humanitarian assistance be allowed in Gaza. If that is not allowed, they keep doing it. They've fired 4,000 missiles over Israel. And well, imagine the kind of Houthi, where are they getting this kind of support from? Obviously, some countries supporting them. And the USA has made it absolutely clear that it's Iran which is supporting them. Otherwise, the Iranians have said, don't bulldoze your way through us. The foreign minister of Iran is very clear. But Americans also have an interest in that entire area. The entire purpose of what the Houthis are doing there is to showcase USA in a poor light, that they cannot do anything in the Red Sea, and all that the Houthis have done in the last year or so, probably capsized about 2 odd vessels, taken 1 odd vessel, maybe another 4 odd people have died. That's all. But they just see the amount of, I would say the 15% of the world trade affected, leading to cost. And now, probably President Trump feels that this is the time that the world needs to be told that USA can't be shown in poor light. Biden may have shown according to him, but he's going to be very hard at Iran also. And of course, he's not going to, well, as you rightly said, rain or hell, he's going to sort out Houthis. That's what he's looking at.
Yeah. Burzine, it's interesting that in the last few weeks, you've got Donald Trump extending some sort of olive branch to Iran, Iran rejecting that olive branch as far as the nuclear talks are concerned. And then you have a few days later, Donald Trump directly attacking Iran for what's been happening in the Red Sea. How do you see this really moving forward, considering the fact that Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi has also said that Washington cannot dictate Iran's foreign policy?
Well, this is typical coming from Araghchi and the regime in Tehran, so there's nothing new about that, because Iran thrives on defiance. What else does a discredited regime at home, racking under COVID and other economic failures, have to show for itself, except that it stands up to the US, and in so doing takes a radical revolutionary line in consonance with what has been its philosophy since 1979, to stand up to the US as a so-called hegemon. And that goes down like a treat with certain Muslim dissidents and other dissatisfied elements in the Islamic world. But that's just cheap rhetoric and for the gallery, the Muslim gallery at large. What else does Iran have to show for itself? Absolutely nothing, except, of course, creating chaos through the region, murder and mayhem, with the Houthis as just one of its proxies, among others. Hezbollah is, of course, down and out, but Iraq is a vassal state for all purposes and intents under Tehran's heel, not to mention also the Hamas fighters who are pretty much down and out, who were funded by Iran. So the comments by the Iranian foreign minister are all for familiar piece of talking about defiance and saber rattling, but deep down they are apprehensive of what would happen to them. And please note, Abdul Malik al-Houthi and his spokespersons would have said that our policy is autonomous and we don't take dictation from Tehran. There is nothing to suggest otherwise. Where else does how else are the Houthis equipped with such defining arsenal to actually attack the USS Harry Truman, a nuclear aircraft carrier, on Saturday, Sunday in the early hours of the morning? Not to mention when the Houthis have also in the recent past, attacked Riyadh International Airport, a drone attack which was intercepted. So these audacious attempts are only done with Tehran's blessing and funding.
Okay.
So a denial on their part and their contention that they are Gaza's shield will only go down well with those who are terrorists in the region and their empathizers abroad. At the same time, you have to ask yourself, is this a priority for the
Okay.
Houthis, given that Yemen has practically turned into a fourth world, not even third world country, reading from all sorts of problems, not to mention diarrhea, dengue fever, starvation, and famine like conditions, all thanks to the Houthis and the civil war since 2014. Over to you, Shreya.
Okay. So obviously, the kind of conflict that prevails in the region obviously will have its ripple effects, on the neighboring countries and in the region. But Dr. Harrison, a lot of supporters also say that why should US and the West have the kind of hegemony that they enjoy currently? Why can't the Iran, Russia, China nexus have that kind of hegemony, or at least break the kind of hegemony that the US and the West wants to have in the region?
Well, I'm not sure that hegemony is actually the proper term here. If you've watched particularly the last 8 years or so, what the U.S. has and has not been able to accomplish, I think many would say that they would like to see the U.S. actually act as a hegemon. But certainly, the U.S. and the West have put together a not perfect system, but one that has benefited large amounts of the world. 300 million fewer people are in poverty because of the global trade system. It is not perfect. There is no question about that. And Russia, and particularly Iran, and maybe China, if Chinese policy is not clear, but at least those first two are very interested in deconstructing that system, or at least trying to create a different role for themselves. And both have a great opportunity to benefit from a peaceful and prosperous world. Neither one of them seems to want to take that opportunity that is being presented to them. So, like it or not, the United States and the West have made an investment in an international system, and that system requires security, particularly when you have a group like the Houthis that are getting state sponsorship. The degree can be debated, but there is no doubt that there is at least some sponsorship from a nation that does not want the global system to function in the way that it is now. So that if the system is going to work, you need a partnership. The United States and Europe have taken that upon themselves, and there's far more benefit globally than there is not. The world does not suffer from an overabundance of leadership from the United States and Europe. It tends to suffer when there isn't any. And certainly the last 4 years, there has been a question as to whether the United States is still leading. And it goes back, obviously, even longer, that what is the U.S. commitment to Europe and other places? So certainly if the Trump administration is taking these actions to just try to underscore the fact that despite what certainly some policy seems to suggest from the United States, that it is withdrawing from the world, that's not the case. It is changing in emphasis, certainly, but it certainly is not withdrawing.
Okay, so then do you therefore agree to the fact, Dr. Harrison, that Donald Trump will take this entire conflict to a logical conclusion that will favor the United States of America?
Well, certainly that has been his policy right from the original run for the presidency, that he wants to put America first, whatever that means. And certainly he is not always doing that in the way that one would argue is the most direct way of accomplishing those policy goals. But there is more to the administration's involvement in Yemen than just direct American interests. Certainly trade that for the United States does not necessarily go directly through the Red Sea. A global trading system will be disrupted, so that will have an impact certainly on the United States and others. But I think this is a way of suggesting to Tehran that they need to start behaving more appropriately for the international system, and they need to take into account that their foreign policy, which they have carefully built over the decades, their security policy, which has been carefully built over the decades, is now in shambles. And the only functioning proxy that they really have now that has any impact on the global system are the Houthis. And that if the United States and European partners can somehow diminish that, and again, I would suggest I'm not entirely sure how militarily that will be accomplished, but if the United States is willing to do that, Iran is really on its back foot and will have to come to terms with whether or not they are going to engage in more productive talks with not only their nuclear program, but which the issues that really aggravate their neighbors. It's the missile program, it's the proxy program, it's the other things that they are doing to disturb regional peace. Regional peace is secured not by what Iran is doing, but for Iran's purposes, they would secure it, they think, should they get a nuclear weapon. And that obviously cannot happen.
Okay. Of course, in the past few days, Donald Trump did extend an olive branch for new talks as far as, nuclear deal is concerned with Iran. That was rejected. And in fact, Iran agreed to having those similar talks with China and Russia. But General Kulkarni, as far as India is concerned, we have grappled with the US-Iran strained ties back in 2018 as well. There were sanctions in place. We've got a Chabahar port. India is one of the largest oil importers from Iran. So obviously we have been impacted. In fact, just recently, 4 Indian companies were also sanctioned by America as far as Iranian oil imports are concerned. This time around, have we learned our lessons? How are we planning to grapple with it? What would be the kind of impact that India will have?
India has managed it very well, balanced it very well. We have Indian Navy onto the east of the Red Sea, ensuring at least our shipments go through, because 50% of our trade passes through the Red Sea, and therefore it's very important for India. We managed it well, both with Iran and also Russia. And as a result of which, even now, this particular attack, you notice that the Americans had to speak to Lavrov. The very fact that they've spoken to Lavrov, taken Russian on board before doing what they've done, and what Lavrov's statement is quite that we require a political solution. Therefore, they know, the Americans know, that it's not that easy. But notwithstanding all that, the very fact that first the tariff, then the additional insurance cost, now additional rates that will go up because of this. Obviously, Trump is insisting that this trade must pass through, because it's a huge trade. 15% of the world's trade passes through Red Sea, Suez Canal, and therefore it's very, very important from that point of view. And obviously, the very fact that the Americans have targeted Houthis, which they should have done long back. I'm surprised, as I said, the Djibouti naval base comprising of 8 countries isn't very far, not very far at all from where the Sana operating base of Houthis is. And despite that, we find that it's taken almost 4 years for America to declare Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization. So FTO is just being named by Mr. Trump. So there is a lot that is going on. Hopefully, if you started off and he intends to rain hell on Houthis, then he might well as culminate in win. Otherwise, it'll be shown in a very poor light. Because if the Americans want peace with Ukraine and Russia, Americans want peace in Israel, but the Houthis are just the other way around. They said until and unless Israelis are cooling down in Gaza, they are not going to let loose. So this particular situation is indeed difficult. But yes, for India, well, we have to really be very balanced. We have succeeded so far, and I'm hopeful we'll succeed hereinafter also. That would not be a problem. The very fact that the Russians have been taken on board by the Americans for this attack, they cannot possibly, sort of keep the Russians totally out of it. The Chinese are the beneficiaries, because the Chinese ships are passing through right now also. So the Chinese are not affected at all. It's the American ships, the UK ships, and all ships that are going to take any, I would say, ferrying anything for Israel, or the Israeli ships for that matter. All those are being banned. Otherwise, the shipping is on. So that is where I think it matters to USA. I think USA will have to do it, and they have no other option. But India, so far, is not affected as of now. Yeah.
Okay. Burzine, how do you then see this moving forward? The fact that there is an escalation, the Houthis have retaliated as well twice since the attacks happened over the weekend. How do you see this really moving forward in the near future now?
Let me just say this. Prior to Washington sending out this signal to the Houthis in the early hours of Sunday morning, courtesy calls were placed to both Jerusalem and Moscow. And Lavrov's comments are typical diplomatic speak, just blandishments that we need a political solution to the impasse, which is all very well, but for the fact that Moscow has, in the past, recent past, aided the Houthis, just as it has aided Hamas. And President Trump can take an empathic view of Putin and has a personal relationship with him, but he is going to discover that Russia is a disruptor in the region too, in the Middle East, just like Iran. And it will dawn upon President Trump eventually that Russia will not necessarily dovetail in its views with Washington of how the Middle East reset ought to take place. And that will be interesting to see. And Lavrov's comments will not go down well personally with Mr. Trump, who pursues a very personalized form of politics and doesn't stand for detractors and opposition to his view. And Russia's view is definitely different when it comes to not just the Houthis, but also on the question of Hamas and Israel. So that will be seen in the near future as things unfold. But for now, of course, Trump is determined to carry out what he does. And Iran, it is only natural, would not undertake talks with Washington and Trump for the simple reason that the entire regime's raison d'etre is based on an antagonistic posturing towards the US. So any capitulation on the part of a discredited regime and a discredited authoritarian leader like the Supreme Leader Khamenei would only further diminish his standing in the eyes of Iranians who are disgruntled even at the best of times as citizens of that repressive republic.
Okay. So we'll have to wait and watch how this really unfolds. For now, tensions remain high between the United States of America and Iran. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much to all of you gentlemen, General Kulkarni, Dr. John Harrison and Burzine Waghmar. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us on Global Mirror and sharing your perspective. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it's a wrap on Global Mirror. News and updates will continue. Thank you very much for joining us at the moment. Up next is Neha Koshi with Beyond the Headline.